shows July's haul surpassing the previous record of 27 billion set in June. And reactions are coming in from around the world to President Trump's latest tariffs. Some, like Japan and Cambodia, welcomed the reduced rates. Others, like New Zealand and Taiwan, are pushing for lower figures. Here's Japan's Chief Cabinet Secretary discussing the country's new tariff rate of 15%.
We believe that the recent executive action, based on a series of agreements, will help reduce uncertainty surrounding U.S. trade policy and lessen the risk that such policies could negatively affect the Japanese and global economies.
You're aware the United States has today announced a new tariff regime which increases tariffs on New Zealand goods entering the U.S. from 10 to 15%. This is a disappointing development.
So far, the negotiations have achieved some interim progress. The tax rate has been reduced from 32% to 20%. However, the 20% tariff rate was never Taiwan's target to begin with. We will continue negotiations and strive for a rate that's more favorable for Taiwan.
Norway and Switzerland also expressed disappointment with 15% and 39% tariffs, respectively, saying they will continue to try to negotiate. Australia, meanwhile, said an unchanged rate of 10% is a vindication of Prime Minister Albanese's calm diplomacy with the U.S. Australia joined Pakistan and Thailand in welcoming Trump's latest order as a positive step. And joining us now to discuss whether President Trump has the legal authority to impose tariffs is Gerard Filitti, senior counsel at the Lawfare Project. As an attorney, Gerard specializes in civil rights, national security law, and international law. Good afternoon, Gerard. So there was a hearing yesterday before a federal appeals court, and it seems like many of the judges were skeptical of Trump's use of reciprocal tariffs. To start off, would you mind walking us through perhaps some of the arguments?
Well, the argument on President Trump's part is that there is legislation, the International Economic Emergency Powers Act, IEPA, that would give him the allowance to impose tariffs as a national security measure in an emergency, and that these trade deficits that the United States has been experiencing constitute that emergency that empower him to place tariffs. Now, the appellate court expressed skepticism about this, in part because the language of the legislation does not specifically mention tariffs, in part because it's hard to see a long-standing deficit as an urgent or a new emergency, and also in part because of recent Supreme Court rulings that major questions, especially ones that are so weighty on the economy, require clear congressional approval, clear congressional authorization, and this is not what IEPA entails. So there was a lot of skepticism that was raised on President Trump's use of this measure.
So there's a lot of points to go through, but one of them is how do you know when there's an economic emergency? How do courts evaluate that, economically speaking? What do they consider?
There's no bright line for a court to evaluate that. It's on the circumstances, on the facts at issue before the court. And here we're not talking about a new problem. We're talking about a long-standing deficit that's been decades in the making. So this is why we have skepticism from the court. Now, IEPA also significantly doesn't mention tariffs. When this legislation was first passed, it was meant to give the president power to impose sanctions or to freeze assets in a national emergency when there is, for example, conflict with a foreign country. So what we're seeing now, the use of tariffs, which is a normal trade mechanism, President Trump is arguing that there is an emergency that requires its use, and the court doesn't have a bright line to follow. It's just using its common sense based on the facts at present.
So another point was that the judge said it's hard to see how Congress intended to give the president such broad tariff authority, right? So how is tariff authority actually split between Congress and the president?
Well, Congress, it is solely within the province of Congress to enact tariffs. That is delegated to Congress under Article 1 of the Constitution. So in order for the president to have tariff authority, it would need to be delegated by Congress to him. And currently there is no specific legislation that does that. This is why President Trump used IEPA. That is the closest thing to regulating trade that the president can do under law that was delegated by Congress, authority that was delegated by Congress to the president.
So what do you make of the administration's comparison to the Trading with the Enemy Act?
The Trading with the Enemy Act is what IEEPA replaced. The Trading with the Enemy Act did empower, a court did rule that that did include tariffs. This is why President Trump is saying that if you look at the law before IEEPA, the law on which IEEPA was modeled, that was ruled by a court to encompass tariffs, and therefore tariffs should be within his purview in this new legislation. However, because IEEPA doesn't specifically mention tariffs, this is why there's been successful opposition so far to President Trump's use of this measure. It all comes down to a question of what authority specifically Congress gave to the president.
Do you think the absence of the word tariffs in IEEPA weakens the administration's argument?
I think it does weaken the administration's argument, especially in light of more recent Supreme Court decisions from the last few years, which have as a pattern established that when Congress delegates authority, it needs to be explicit, especially when you have major questions, especially when you have issues of such national importance or such economic importance, that you can't rely on an interpretation that's vague. The delegation has to be clear. So I think this is why the court was carefully looking at the language of IEEPA.
What do you say to the idea, and you mentioned this earlier, about trade deficits and how they've been, existing for a long time. How does that constitute as an emergency?
For them to constitute an emergency, President Trump would have to make an argument of what's changed or what's new, or basically to explain that trade deficits have reached such a high level that it is now an emergency compared to what the levels were a year ago or 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And that's a burden that he hasn't met yet. He hasn't explained why this is suddenly an emergency and it's not something that should be addressed in the normal course of congressional business.
Have you seen any signs of how this court might decide?
The way we heard the questioning, we are inclined to think that the court is not likely to side with President Trump. The court is likely to say that he exceeded congressional authority in engaging in these tariffs. However, this is something that we will see appealed, and this far from resolves the issue.
And then it's going to go to the Supreme Court potentially, right?
Potentially to the Supreme Court, and there are also other mechanisms that President Trump could use to try to justify tariffs. But at the end of the day, it's notable that he has been very successful so far in negotiating tariffs, and that many countries are looking at the Supreme Court and what it will ultimately decide, not at what the appeals court is questioning.
Okay, let's say hypothetically speaking, the Supreme Court takes on this case and upholds the block on President Trump's tariffs. What are the impacts? What are the implications? What happens after that?
The impact is that it would stop tariffs that are now in place that have not been negotiated with other countries. For countries that have reached a trade deal with the United States, that's irrelevant. A deal has been signed. But the threat of future tariffs would be taken off the table, and that would be a blow to President Trump's ability to improve the deficit by imposing these tariffs. He would have to go back to the drawing board and find a different law or a different mechanism to do so. Now, it's also likely that President Trump will work with Congress, which, let's not forget, is controlled still by the Republican Party, to give him legislation that allows him to enact tariffs. So that would be the logical step. Regardless of what the Supreme Court rules, it would be for Congress to draft authorizing legislation so that these tariffs can continue to be imposed.
Coming up, Ecuador is looking at ways to help the U.S. prevent illegal immigration. They're considering possible visa restrictions for citizens from 45 countries. And a recent study shows nearly 29 million Americans can't afford their prescription drugs or health care. President Trump is taking pharma companies to task to try and bring down costs. That and more after the break.
Focus on beauty, showcase nature, share kindness, feel brightness, capture the beautiful moments in your eyes. Your works will be showcased in galleries and on multiple online platforms, appreciated and collected. Please visit photo.ntdtv.com.
The bladder control aisle. You won't shop here again. Your private business is your own. The constant struggle is over. Now there's a better way. It's HDIS. We home deliver bladder control products. We understand how you feel. For over 25 years, we've home delivered to many of the 20 million Americans who deal with incontinence. We offer all brands. We pay shipping and use plain, unmarked boxes. If we can help you or someone you care for, call for your free product sample pack and $45 in money-saving coupons. Our counselors will help you choose the right product. And unlike stores, we're always in stock. You'll get what you need. Satisfaction guaranteed. HDIS, the better way.
For your free sample pack with your free catalog, $45 in money-saving coupons, and free product samples, call 1-800-701-6159. That's 1-800-701-6159.
There's a whirlwind of emotion and activity going on in this painting. And there's chaos all around and threat from below. The wolves surrounding her, and they're anything but unmoved. They're moving all the time, and we sense that. But this little girl remains.
Ecuador is looking at ways to help the U.S. prevent illegal immigration. The South American country is considering possible visa restrictions for citizens from 45 countries, including Cuba and Haiti. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem says Ecuador and America have a long history of partnerships, but they've never been stronger. Listen.
Ecuador and America have a long history of partnerships, but they've never been stronger before. Today, during our conversation with President Noboa, we talked about more partnerships that we can pursue. One's on sharing biometric information on criminals, on terrorists, and on gang members that will help us bring people to justice.
Ecuador has similar restrictions on Chinese nationals traveling to the United States through Ecuador. Noem says the measures have reduced their entry at the southern border by 70%. The United States and Ecuador yesterday signed an agreement aimed at strengthening their collaboration against transnational criminal networks. The agreement facilitates the exchange of information on suspected criminal offenders and risk assessments of cargo and travelers. On Wednesday, Noem signed a similar agreement with Chile. Expensive medicines put financial pressure on a lot of Americans. President Trump is taking action, urging pharmaceutical companies to lower prescription drug costs for Americans. The White House press secretary read excerpts yesterday from one of the letters Trump sent to 17 drug makers, vowing to protect families from what he calls abusive drug pricing practices.
On May 12, 2025, I signed an executive order delivering most favored nation prescription drug pricing to American patients to stop global freeloading and guarantee that Americans pay the same prices enjoyed by other developed nations. Right now, brand name drugs in the United States are up to 3 times higher on average than anywhere else for the identical medicines. This unacceptable burden on hardworking American families ends with my administration.
President Trump told pharmaceutical company CEOs he expects them to implement most favored nation drug pricing within 60 days. Trump has vowed to take aggressive action if drug makers do not voluntarily offer the lowest price to U.S. customers. A 2024 DHS report says prescription drug prices are higher in the U.S. than anywhere else in the world, more than twice as much on average. The disparity is even greater for the most expensive medications. New campaign finance reports show billionaire Elon Musk donated $15 million to super PACs favoring President Trump and Republicans. He gave $5 million each to the Senate Leadership Fund, the Congressional Leadership Fund, and the MAGA Inc. The leadership funds are aimed at helping Republicans keep their majorities in Congress after next year's midterm elections. According to the reports, the donations came on June 27th, just days before Musk declared he would form his own political party. It's unclear if he has taken steps so far to do just that. The National Transportation Safety Board is holding its final day of public testimony over the January mid-air crash between an Army helicopter and commercial jet. One topic at the center of proceedings was the Traffic Alert and Collision Avoidance System, known as TCAS.
TCAS would first determine should the aircraft move in an upward direction or should the own aircraft maneuver in a downward direction. And then once it decides that, it decides whether or not, or the strength of that maneuver should be it to simply tell pilots to monitor their vertical speed, that is, not to change their vertical profile or not to descend or climb, as the case might be. It might be that level off RA that Mr. Suki talked about, or in the older versions, it would tell them to reduce their vertical rate, or it might tell them to climb or descend.
2 previous days of testimony highlighted a number of factors that likely contributed to the collision over Reagan National Airport. One major issue that emerged was the altitude of the Black Hawk helicopter, which was flying too high. Concerns over heavy chopper traffic came into focus as well. NTSB Chairwoman Jennifer Homendy urged the FAA to, quote, do better. The January crash killed all 67 people on board both aircraft. Flash floods swept through the northeast where a child has died. Meanwhile, the southeast braces for torrential rains. Here's the latest forecast and warnings.
Parts of the Northeast are recovering from widespread flooding, flight delays, and suspended rail lines following Thursday's torrential rain. Officials say a child died after being swept into a drainage pipe in Maryland as flash floods overwhelmed neighborhoods north of Baltimore. Forecasters measured around 5 inches of rainfall in parts of New York, causing flash flooding on highways and in subway systems. In Philadelphia, floodwater poured into subway stations, while in Reading, Pennsylvania, roads and vehicles were submerged. The governors of New York and New Jersey issued emergency declarations warning of possible extreme flash flooding. Air and rail traffic were severely impacted. Over 1,000 flights were canceled, and Amtrak suspended service between Philadelphia and Wilmington after tracks were flooded. Forecasters blamed the storm outbreak on a cold front carrying an unstable air mass and excessive atmospheric moisture. Meanwhile, the southeast is getting a break from punishing heat, but it isn't much relief. Tropical downpours and thunderstorms are expected to return and pose a renewed flash flood threat starting this weekend. The heaviest rainfall is expected from the Florida Panhandle through the Carolinas. Cities including Charleston, Savannah, and Wilmington are under alert. The National Weather Service forecasts several inches of rain beginning Friday, fueled by tropical moisture and a weakening cold front. A level 2 out of 4 flash flooding risk is forecast for Friday and Saturday, with some risk lingering into Sunday.
Astronauts are on their way to the International Space Station. The crew hitched a ride on a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket after a year-long delay.
3, 2, 1, ignition. Ignition's full power and liftoff. Go Falcon, go NASA, go Crew 11.
Together we rise as NASA's SpaceX Crew 11 heads up to the International Space Station.
Vehicle is pitching downrange.
1.7 million pounds of thrust.
Propulsion is nominal.
Propelling Falcon 9 as the vehicle pitching downrange and making its way up the East Coast, and will soon join Expedition 73 aboard the orbiting laboratory.
The American, Japanese, and Russian crew of 4 launched from NASA's Kennedy Space Center. SpaceX said the reusable Falcon 9 rocket booster landed safely after launch. The mission comes after 2 NASA astronauts became stranded on the space station last year. Butch Wilmore and Sonny Williams unexpectedly extended their stay after a Boeing Starliner meant to pick them up experienced thruster failures and helium leaks. They landed safely back on Earth in March after catching a ride with SpaceX. The latest SpaceX Dragon crew should reach the orbiting lab this weekend. They'll stay at least on the ISS for 6 months. Coming up, why are parents suing Snapchat? A new Epoch Times report highlights what's behind the lawsuit against the social media platform. We talk with the report's author. Tariffs and additional penalties on India are taking effect today for buying Russian oil. How Moscow might respond if India stops buying oil from Russia. That and more after the break.
We come from a long line of farmers, and there's a sense of pride with being part of these multi-generational businesses. But there's also a significant amount of pressure. My senior year of high school, my dad made the decision that this world no longer needed him in it. I don't know if he was overwhelmed by the bills and checks that weren't going to be coming in because of the strawberries dying off, but it breaks my heart that my dad made a permanent decision for a temporary issue. Don't feel like you have to go through it alone.
Farmers have to take care of their physical and their mental health, because what's a farm without a farmer?
In the mornings, that's my time. Watching the sun come up, I can have a cup of coffee and exercise if I want to. It helps me start the day with a sense of gratitude.
Yay.
Every day is a new opportunity. Don't forget to check in on yourself. Love, your mind.
My mom and dad were traditional Asian parents. Now my father would go to work before I woke up in the morning, and then he would come home too tired to play with me. I tell my son, I love you every single day. Now my dad has never said that to me. Not because he doesn't love me, but because culturally it wasn't comfortable for him. So I teased him the other day and I said, how come you never say that to me? And he said, you're too old now. Now that he's a grandfather, he says, I love you to my son every time he sees him. My advice to all the fathers out there, forget the material things, forget the cultural restrictions. They grow up way too fast for you to waste even a single precious minute or moment.
Say bye-bye. Bye-bye. I am so glad you ladies are here. You each have your own rooms. Thank you. Get settled in. I'll call you for dinner. Adopting teen sisters, it's a lot. Girls, you're gonna be late. You want breakfast? No thanks, we're good. They're always in their own world. What'd you get there? Twice the work. Twice the surprises. Just try it. Good. But if you think of it that way, they're also twice as fulfilling. I think you should ask her yourself.
Is it okay to call you Mom?
Of course you can.
Epoch Times reporter Janice Heisel published a touching report about a mother and her quest to hold Snapchat accountable for the overdose death of her son. The report describes just how easy it is for vulnerable teens like her son to obtain drugs while the drug dealers stay anonymous. The mother found her 14-year-old son dead after he purchased drug pills over the Snapchat. The son thought he was taking fake Oxycontin, but it was instead deadly fentanyl. Snapchat denies responsibility, but the mother's lawsuit is making progress. Joining us now to discuss is Janice. Thank you for coming on today. So talk to us about the scope of this issue and what the Alexander Neville Foundation has found.
The scope of this issue actually involves quite a few parents of teenagers who have been harmed, they say, as a result of ingesting fentanyl. Many of them died. A few of them actually did survive, but suffered terrible lifelong consequences from unknowingly taking fentanyl. They weren't ordering fentanyl. They thought they were getting something else. But these drug dealers will lace these pills with fentanyl because it's cheap, regardless of the risk of death, which is very, very high since fentanyl is such a powerful painkiller. Now, the status of this case currently is that it is moving forward with 63 parents are part of this suit so far. There could be dozens more joining it.
So Snapchat denies allegations that they're responsible for fentanyl-related deaths and injuries. If you don't mind, would you walk us through how a drug dealer on Snapchat could potentially operate and how are they sending drugs?
Well, from what I understand, these drug dealers can actually come up with like a fake name, a fake account. They may initially make some contact by noticing that there's a picture at a wild party, for example, and then they will try to contact the people who posted this picture if they have access to this. And that's one of the ways they can make contact, and assuming that this wild party, that some people there might be interested in trying drugs. They often will also skip to other platforms, perhaps, and try to finish the deal there, so to speak. There's just any number of ways that these drug dealers can connect with potential customers, regardless of them being minors.
So earlier I mentioned how you wrote a very touching article on the Epoch Times. Maybe you can talk to us a little bit about this aspect. How did the Alexander family respond to all this?
So Alexander Neville's mother, Amy, started a foundation in his name. Her statement to me was she forces herself to relive all the time the worst day of her life when she found her son dead in his beanbag chair from this apparent fentanyl. And she is trying as hard as she can to inform parents as well as teenagers about some of the dangers that are lurking out there on social media, not just on Snapchat. She hears from teenagers all the time about being pushed content that they didn't ask for, violent content, content that makes them feel like they want to harm themselves, perhaps. There are a lot of different, what she calls social harms here. And she said that she is dedicating her life to making sure that she informs as many parents as possible about what happened to her son, because 5 years ago, no one, she said, was talking about fentanyl.
Okay, and this is a small detail, but Amy, Alexander's mother, actually has a tattoo. Can you tell us what that symbolizes?
Yes, after her son's death, she was going through her husband, some pictures on her husband's phone, and she found a photograph of a saying that Alexander had posted on his bedroom wall. And it says, to do uncomfortable work. And she says that's what this is for her. And she had that transferred into his own handwriting, a exact replica of that on her forearm to remind her every single day that this is her mission.
Okay, and how is Snapchat responding to the lawsuit?
Snapchat has stated publicly in congressional testimony, as well as through its lawyers in court, that while it sympathizes with the plight of these parents, that this platform feels that it has done a lot of things to try to protect children. The platform says that it has increased some safety features, including some parental controls. However, some people in Congress and people like the Nevilles and other parents don't think that these platforms, including Snapchat, have gone far enough in their efforts to protect children. They claim that some of these platforms are still very, very motivated by profit. The longer you keep somebody's eyes glued to that phone screen, whether it's a young person or an older person, they're going to be exposed to more advertising, which generates money for them. And so very, very smart people have come up with ways to just keep us mesmerized by our phones. I think a lot of us have experienced what that's like.
So is this likely to be a case that potentially ultimately changes the way social media operates?
That's one of the things that they're thinking. It could actually exert some influence across social media, depending on the outcome of this case. They are saying that any court case right now can have a big impact because of the fact that this is such an emerging area of the law. When laws were first put into place regarding how social media platforms operate, those laws didn't really contemplate or think about how these platforms would evolve. The principle was that, you shouldn't be held responsible, these platforms shouldn't be, just because somebody puts something on there and it's bad content or harmful content in some way. But the problem is when these platforms start to take steps to intervene or, send content to people that, these people did not ask for, things like that, then some judges, including the one in this court case involving the Nevilles, they say that that crosses the line into being involved with content. And that's where these platforms could be vulnerable under the current existing laws. There are also proposals to force these changes to be made to improve safety. And so far, those changes have just been voluntary under public pressure from many, many platforms.
Okay, just one last question. And earlier you mentioned Amy Neville's efforts to warn parents and families and Americans in general about the dangers here. Talk to us about the Alexander Neville Foundation.
Well, it's a nonprofit foundation that does aim to educate parents and also help teens about any social media harms out there. One of the biggest things that Amy shared with me is that, again, parents were not talking about, no one was really talking much about fentanyl 5 years ago when her son had this horrible experience, tragic death. And she was telling me that, you know, she looked at her son's phone, for example, thought she was being a good informed parent, but she didn't know what to really, really look for. And a lot of times these drug dealers will communicate with potential customers, including young people, with emojis. And if you don't know what that emoji means, if it's used in a drug-related text, you would not even perceive what was being talked about if you saw these messages.
Such an important topic, Janice, and thank you for covering it. Thanks for coming on the show as well.
Thank you.
Over to the Middle East, President Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff visited southern Gaza today. Witkoff inspected aid delivery sites, joined by U.S. Ambassador to Israel Mike Huckabee. In a social media post, Huckabee said they received briefings from the Israel Defense Forces and spoke to folks on the ground. The aid site is operated by the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, or GHF, an American nonprofit organization. Huckabee said the group delivers more than 1 million meals a day. Witkoff later said in a post that they spent over 5 hours inside Gaza today, level setting the facts on the ground, asserting conditions, and meeting with GHF and other agencies. He said the purpose of the visit was to give President Trump a clear understanding of the humanitarian situation and help craft a plan to deliver aid to the people of Gaza. Witkoff's visit comes a week after U.S. officials walked away from ceasefire talks in Qatar, blaming the Hamas terror group. India is facing tariffs and additional penalties imposed by President Trump. The president says India continues buying Russian oil, thus financing Moscow's war machine. The Kremlin might now have to find new solutions if India stops buying Russian oil. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pasdar has more.
A 25% tariff on imports from India and additional penalties are taking effect on Friday. President Trump announced them on Wednesday, saying India should stop buying oil from Russia because it funds the war in Ukraine. If India now stops buying Russian oil due to Trump's measures, Moscow has to change tactics. Analysts at JP Morgan say Russia could divert some oil to Egypt, Malaysia, Pakistan, Peru, Brunei, South Africa, and Indonesia, or disrupt the CPC pipeline, which runs from Kazakhstan to a Russian Black Sea port. U.S. oil majors Chevron and Exxon hold big stakes there. An expert says if Putin shuts off CPC, oil prices might get well over $80 per barrel, possibly a lot more. Oil prices are currently below $70 per barrel. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent this week also warned China of consequences for buying Russian oil. Trump recently said any country doing business with Russia will face 100% secondary tariffs if Moscow strikes no peace deal by Friday next week. According to Bessent, the Chinese take their sovereignty very seriously. We don't want to impede on their sovereignty, so they'd like to pay 100%. Commenting on the upcoming deadline, Russian President Vladimir Putin on Friday suggested he hopes peace talks will continue.
Negotiations are always in demand and always important, especially if it is a desire for peace.
The Trump administration previously said Putin only talks about peace without actually seeking it. Arian Pasdar, NTD News.
French politicians and citizens are speaking out against the new EU-US trade deal. The agreement imposes 15% tariffs on EU exports while committing massive European investment in US energy and tech. But the lack of reciprocity has led many politicians to call it one-sided and harmful. NTD's international correspondent David Vivez reports from Paris.
Figures from across the political spectrum in France have been speaking out against the EU-US deal since Monday. The trade agreement sets a 15% tariffs on most EU goods entering the US. The EU will also spend $715 billion on American energy and tech and invest $600 billion in the US. While Prime Minister François Bayrou called the deal an act of submission to the US, A National Rally member called on Thursday for a new no-confidence vote against EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. French President Emmanuel Macron said the deal wasn't the end of the matter, adding that Europe does not see itself enough as a power yet. Many in France also believe the deal is one-sided.
I work in leather goods. Many of my customers are Americans. And yes, I'm worried. I should be sending bags to Detroit in August, and I don't know what to do because they were ordered a while ago. They're hand-worked bags, and it will cost me more. Should I charge extra? Honestly, I don't know what to do. No.
I think it will penalize French companies and lead to even higher inflation for citizens. And in my opinion, it's never been as high as it is now, even though the media talk about it much less than last year.
That's exactly Trump's strategy. It's about betting and setting the bar very high. He started with 30%. The Europeans were afraid. In the end, the trap he set worked well. To me, that's a brutal method. The problem today is that Europeans are divided. It's a European Union, and you need all 27 members to ratify any treaty or decision.
For a large majority of French, the deal will mean helping the EU finance the US and facing higher tariffs with nothing in exchange. It's even harder considering 2024's official figures show that the trade deficit between France and the United States was only $4 billion in favor of France out of $150 billion in total trade. Many analysts said the 15% tariffs were decided based on the trade deficit with German cars. That might explain why French political reactions are targeting the EU Commission president for her negotiations rather than the US president. Wine and cognac producers still hope an exemption can be granted. Otherwise, tariffs will jump from 4% to 15% for them in August. David Vives, NTD News, Paris.
A lawyer and a campaigner warn a British law seeking to stop discrimination has unintended consequences. They say it encourages people to judge others based on group identity and not based on character, with a secondary impact on workplace culture. NTD's international correspondent Malcolm Hudson has more for us from London.
Could laws that aim to reduce discrimination end up achieving the opposite result and even have knock-on consequences, such as hindering a nation's economic potential? A new report by the campaign group Don't Divide Us says the answer to these questions is yes, and argues that the UK's Equality Act is not fit for its stated purpose.
The Equality Act 2010 aims to reduce discrimination by giving protections to certain personal characteristics of individuals. For example, based on their race, religion, sex, or if they are disabled or not. But equality and human rights lawyer Anna Lutfi says this runs counter to the principle of equality.
What it means is that equality is no longer equal treatment, fair treatment to everybody, regardless of skin colour, if we stay with the race example, but it's actually been transformed into an ideology that you have to treat people differently.
The report audited records from just over 5,500 employment tribunal cases brought forward on the basis of race discrimination between 2017 and 2024. It found only 281, that's 5%, of race discrimination claims have been upheld in employment courts. While that number is low, it highlights a deeper cultural trend. Director of Don't Divide Us, Alka Segal-Cuthbert, said it encourages people to change how they see themselves.
This is a really worrying bit. We come to identify ourselves primarily by our ethnicity, primarily by our skin colour, not by our actions, our thoughts, what we say, what we do, our professions, how we, our friendship circles, or our interests that bring different people together. No, it's purely by our skin colour.
It's a shift away from judging people based on the content of their character and instead judging by their group identity.
What that means in the workplace is that telling jokes, asking somebody, what did you do over Easter weekend, counts as a microaggression.
She said this actually happened in a tribunal case. The argument went like this.
Not everybody celebrates Easter, so how dare you come in and ask about an Easter weekend when that could be aggressing somebody who's not a Christian.
She said this attitude creates fractures in the workplace. People are worried that what they say could be interpreted as problematic, regardless of how innocent the intention or comment. This impacts people's ability to speak freely. The British government is currently consulting over if it should introduce a new Race Equality Act. it would seek to strengthen the provisions in the current Equality Act. Lutfi said it's a wolf in sheep's clothing.
Race has become a massive strategic way for big corporations and state actors to increase their control of individuals and to justify whatever it is they want to justify in the workplace and elsewhere. But it's clearly not something that the ordinary man or woman on the street needs.
The report recommends a legal review into the Equality Act to find aspects which are incompatible with the principle of equality before the law, and eventually repeal the entire system of codified protected characteristics enshrined in the Act. Malcolm Hudson, NTD News, London.
Up next, the Chicago Cubs will be hosting the 2027 Major League Baseball All-Star Game. Find out more after the break.
Big things are happening at Mathis Homes. Save all summer long with price drop alerts all over the store. Their suppliers have cut prices and they're passing those savings on to you. Get new lower prices with top name recliners as low as $199 and huge markdowns on hundreds of sofas in all the latest styles. Now's your chance to save big for every room in your house. There's something for everyone. Plus, get 12-month no-interest financing and free delivery. Check out these price drop alerts and save at your furniture superstore, Mathis Home.
You are not hidden. There's never been a moment you were forgotten. You are not hopeless. Though you have been broken, your innocence stolen. I hear your SOS, your SOS. I will send out an army to find you in the middle of the darkest night. It's true, I will rescue you.
On streets across America, young people are homeless, abused, in danger. Covenant House is helping young people with nowhere else to turn. But the need is overwhelming. Please call or go online now with your gift of $19 a month. You'll help provide hot meals, safe shelter, medical care, and love to more than 2,000 young people who sleep at a Covenant House every night. Homeless young people are afraid and alone. Your monthly donation right now will show them they are loved and safe.
I have no words to express how Covenant House changed my life.
Call or go online now and give just $19 a month. We'll send you this comforting blanket as a reminder of the difference you're making in a young person's life. Call or go online now to safeplacetosleep.org.
I trod on my glasses yesterday, and I had to pay up front for a new pair that I can't even pick up for another 10 days. So I looked for another way, and I found Select Specs. I ordered online. My new glasses just arrived this morning, and I can pay over the next few weeks. This is the way to buy glasses.
See now, pay later with Select Specs. Next day delivery and deferred payment options, only at selectspecs.com.
The Chicago Cubs will be hosting the 2027 Major League Baseball All-Star Game. MLB Commissioner Rob Manfred made the announcement today, praising the team and city officials for making security and safety updates to the area. The Midsummer Classic hasn't been played inside Wrigley Field since 1990, and this marks the 4th time the Cubs have hosted the game. The 2026 All-Star Game is taking place at Philadelphia's Citizens Bank Park. Judy Hobbs and Nick Wilde are back. Disney is releasing the first full trailer for its animation film, Zootopia 2. The highly anticipated animated sequel shows Judy and Nick attempting a group therapy session for dysfunctional police partners. Their partnership will be put to the test when they take on a new task involving a snake that has arrived in Zootopia. Disney has the big hopes for the sequel. Zootopia was a hit in 2016 and won an Oscar for Best Animated Film. Zootopia 2 will hit theaters on November 26 during the Thanksgiving holiday.
Fox, this is a make or break assignment. Fail and I will split you up.
No snake has set foot in Zootopia in forever.
Hops and Wild?
Wild and Hops. The dream team. Whoop. Sorry, Paul.
1, 2, 3, 4. Kiss the second ring right now.
Coming up, starting today, millions of borrowers enrolled in the SAVE plan will begin accruing interest on their student loans. We have that and more after the break.
Whispered across generations, a hidden secret unveils the essence of longevity and vitality. A timeless legend regarding energy and wonder. Rooted in ancient health wisdom, we proudly introduce Pure Tang Black Ginseng, a 100% natural organic energy drink made from premium 6-year-old Korean ginseng. It takes 2,260 days and nights from seed to growth, undergoing a meticulous 9-step process of steaming and drying. Black ginseng reaches its full potency, enriched with ginsenoside RG3 and enhanced absorption efficiency. No sugar, no caffeine, no artificial ingredients. Experience the pure natural power of Pure Tang Black Ginseng. Nourish your body, strengthen your immunity, and boost your energy. To order Pure Tang Black Ginseng, please visit puretang.com.
Hi, I'm Ty Pennington, here for Choice Home Warranty. They protect my home from expensive repairs, and they can do the same for you. No matter if it's your refrigerator, plumbing, or more than 20 other home systems and appliances, Choice Home Warranty has saved millions of homeowners a whole lot of money. For a low monthly fee, you get their nationwide network of trusted local technicians with plans that cover repairs and replacements done quickly and the right way. No more headaches searching for technicians. No more budget-breaking chaos. Just a peace of mind of having Choice Home Warranty at your service. Call Choice Home Warranty now and save big with their special offer of your first month free and free limited roof coverage. Call now.
Call Choice Home Warranty for your free personalized quote and to get your first month free. Call in the next 5 minutes, and as our special offer, you'll receive free limited roof coverage. Call now to lock in your rate and save big. Call 800-210-6422, 800-210-6422.
The bladder control aisle. You won't shop here again. Your private business is your own. The constant struggle is over. Now there's a better way. It's HDIS. We home deliver bladder control products. We understand how you feel. For over 25 years, we've home delivered to many of the 20 million Americans who deal with incontinence. We offer all brands. We pay shipping and use plain, unmarked boxes. If we can help you or someone you care for, call for your free product sample pack and $45 in money-saving coupons. Our counselors will help you choose the right product. And unlike stores, we're always in stock. You'll get what you need. Satisfaction guaranteed. HDIS, the better way.
For your free sample pack with your free catalog, $45 in money-saving coupons, and free product samples, call 1-800-701-6159. That's 1-800-701-6159.
There are real consequences to controlled media. And NTD's founders know them firsthand. Our freedom of thought is the price. This is the lesson that guides us in everything we do.
So there's the tear gas there.
We know the value of a free society.